Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Last year I decided to do a what if video that was truly unlike any that had come before it. An April Fool's special featuring 4 funny and utterly bonkers scenarios. And it seemed to go down quite well with you all, so here I am again with a second one. Obviously April Fool's has already been and gone, so I'm sorry that this video is so incredibly late to the party. I think about 2 weeks now. Unfortunately, I had something crop up concerning my family which I needed to recover from, and so I didn't have the time or energy to work on this video whilst all of that was going on, plus I was also then on holiday for a few days too. But I managed to get to this now thankfully, and I hope you all don't mind the delay. So we have 3 scenarios this time around, each focusing on some daft companion focused ideas. And the scripts for them were written by 2 of my friends, Optical Spectre and Vinny Quick. But without any further ado, let's start off with Optical's What If Zombo had become a companion. The year is 1965. Doctor Who's 2nd season is underway and is proving to be a smash hit with audiences, as families tuned in every Saturday night to see their favourite time and space heroes battle evil across the universe. In February of that year, a new adventure begins, that being the critically acclaimed tale known as The Web Planet. It sees the Doctor trapped on the planet of Vortis, where he must defeat the deadly Animus and end its reign of terror. In its epic tale, the Doctor and Vicky find a temporary new ally in the form of Zombo, a loyal zombie free from the Animus's control. To the disappointment of family and fanatics around the world, Zombo would never be seen beyond the Web Planet and faded into obscurity. Although there still exists a small but passionately dedicated Zombo fanbase known as the Zombians, the character has yet to reappear in any other Doctor Who tale as of 2026. But what if things had been different? What if the BBC became aware of the unified love for Zombo much earlier and decided to keep the character around? What if Zombo had become a companion? So for this scenario to work, the BBC would have to become aware of the Zombo mania much earlier than they did in order to allow the character to stay on as a regular. We know from interviews that Elizabeth Dunbar, who worked as an uncredited assistant floor manager, was one of the first public fans for Zombo. So even though the likelihood of this happening is quite low, we could say that she somehow makes Verity Lambert and Dennis Spooner aware of the cult following around the character, much sooner than they did in our timeline. With this knowledge, the pair decided to capitalise on Zombo's popularity and decide to bring them on as a new companion. In terms of who would play Zombo, well, I imagine the BBC would want to get someone relatively famous to play the character in order to keep viewers coming back to the show. And taking some inspiration from the Zombo fanbase, I think the most suitable candidate for the role would be Roger Moore. Who of course would go on to play James Bond from 1973 to 1985. With Zombo now set to be a companion, there would need to be some drastic changes to the show going forwards. The first change would be the need to write a new ending for the Web Planet, where the Doctor and his companions decide to take Zombo with them on board the TARDIS. For the next few stories, however, Zombo would take something of a back seat due to their last-minute addition to the cast, similar to how Jamie was in his first few stories. And nobody in the Crusaders or the Space Museum chooses to question why the Doctor and his companions are travelling with a giant ant, because everybody knows Zombo and everybody loves Zombo. Although by the time Ian and Barbara leave in the chase, I imagine Zombo would start to become a much more active presence in the show. The inclusion of Zombo, however, is not without its flaws, as I think there is a strong likelihood that the producers wouldn't want a third companion on the show. So we probably wouldn't have got Peter Purves as Stephen Taylor. Most of early season 3 would play out the same, with Vicky leaving in the Mythmakers and being replaced by Katerina. However, now we come to the Daleks' master plan, where we see one of the biggest changes yet. Unlike in our timeline, where the current production team decided to write poor old Katerina out after just 4 episodes, It's instead decided to keep her around for a bit longer, due to the character's insanely electric chemistry with Zombo. The character still dies in Master Plan though, as she would take the place of Sarah Kingdom and be aged to death. So, not much of a better fate for Katarina, really. The rest of Season 3 would play out exactly the same. The only noteworthy change would come in the massacre, where unlike Stephen, who disapproves of the Doctor leaving Anne to die and even leaves the Doctor, Zombo fully agrees and endorses the Doctor's decision and sticks with him, saying that bros come before hoes. Season 4 Season 4 also remains mostly the same, minus the fact that Jamie McCrimmon never becomes a companion. Although plans were made to bring Jamie on, these were very quickly cancelled when it was discovered that Hines was planning on killing Roger Moore in order to take over his role as Zombo, a role which any actor would have killed for by 1967. Like in our own universe, the ending to The Highlanders is initially refilmed to have Jamie become a companion. However, when news about Hines broke, the ending was refilmed again to have Zombo eat Jamie alive, a decision most fans called a smart move. From there on, things would stay exactly the same for the next few years, with the only difference being the inclusion of Zombo as the main male companion. The next radical change to the timeline would come in Season 8, with the current production team planning to give the Doctor a recurring rival enemy in the form of the Master. They also decide to give Zombo his own arch-nemesis, a rival Zarbi known as Mudso, who will be played by legendary actor William Shatner. Mudso would co-star alongside Roger Delgado in every Master story. Season 8 would also prove to be Roger Moore's final year as Zombo. As much as he adored playing the role and wanted to keep going, he realised he was getting too old for the part, and so he stepped down and went on to play James Bond. Finding a suitable actor to replace Moore as Zombo for Season 9 proved to be a difficult task for the producers, but they finally found a suitable replacement in Malcolm McDowell. Season 9 would begin as per usual with Day of the Daleks. The recasting of Zombo is very quickly explained as Zombo going through Zarbiti, before the story continues as per normal. Initial fan reception to the recasting was very controversial, with the die-hard Zombo fans calling the decision to replace Moore with McDowell as a not good move. However, appreciation for McDowell soon grew, and by the end of Season 9 had proven himself worthy as a successor to Moore. From there, things would continue as you'd now expect. Zombo continues to remain a permanent presence in classic Doctor Who until its eventual cancellation in 1989. Although producer John Nathan Turner toyed with the idea of getting rid of Zombo several times across his tenure, all notions were squandered when the Zombians threatened to burn a cactus in retaliation, so nothing ever came of these plans. Over the first 26 years, Zombo would have been played by 4 actors, respectively. Roger Moore from 1965 to 1971, Malcolm McDowell from 1972 to 79, Harrison Ford from 1979 to 1987, and Tom Cruise from 1988 to 1989. Like with the Master, the Rani would also get her own Zombo counterpart in the form of LeBeau, initially played by Sigourney Weaver in a classic series. And like the Rani, the character would undergo a bi-generation in 2025, with the 2 LeBeaus being played by Claudia Black and Scarlett Johansson, respectively. Although the love for Zombo continued to remain strong until the end, it just wasn't enough to save the show from the state it was in by 1989. Like in real life, the show makes 2 attempts at a comeback, both attempts with the loyal Zombo at the Doctor's side. First came in 1996, which saw Paul McGann's 8th Doctor teaming up with a new Zombo, played by Wesley Snipes. The first time the role was played by a non-white actor. Then 9 years later, we eventually got what would become known as New Who, which would star Christopher Eccleston, Billy Piper, and of course Zombo, now played by Christian Bale. This would also mark the beginning of the Zombo Mark II design, with the character being given a grittier and edgier design, as well as now being a CGI creation. Throughout the course of New Who, Zombo was played by 4 actors, respectively. For RTD's first tenure, the character was voiced by Christian Bale, a lifelong die-hard Zombo fan who gave up the opportunity to play Batman for the role, with Nolan's Batman instead being played by George Clooney. However, when Moffat took over as showrunner, he wanted to take the dynamic between the Doctor and Zombo to the next level, and so he cast the first ever female actress in the role of Zombo, Eva Green. Green's portrayal of Zombo still remains the most controversial portrayal of the character, due to Moffat's overt sexualization of the character and the infamous apple crumble and custard scene between Zombo and Matt Smith's Doctor. Oh, I really don't want to know what happened in that. Moffat would eventually see the errors of his mistake, and so he recast the role of Zombo back to male with the 12th Doctor, with Zombo now being played by Hugh Jackman, a fan favourite that many feel goes underappreciated to this very day. Jackman would eventually step down from the role following on from the 2023 specials, where he was replaced with Bob Odenkirk, who continued to play the role until Zombo's tragic, utterly heartbreaking demise in the Interstellar Song Contest, where he ends up floating through space, frozen to death. And yeah, it was a very sad day for the entire world. Everyone, the entire planet wore nothing but black for the next few months after that. The entire UK government called a state of mourning, and there was a state funeral. It was just so sad, and the Zombians were so furious with RTD for killing off their beloved and by far the best Doctor Who character there's ever been, even better than the Doctor themselves. Yeah, it was a really sad day. I could get emotional just thinking of it. Justice for Zombo. And that's where we're going to leave this scenario. I think it goes saying that this would have been the best thing ever, and even though it's not his fault, well, actually, it was his fault because he killed Zombo off, and yeah, it was apparently because he just really didn't like Zombo. He actually fell out with the prop at one point in real life. So yeah, I blame Russell T Davies for this timeline not existing. I'll just leave some very wise words to sum up how I imagine we all feel right now.
Sack Russell T Davies, sack Jane Tranter, sack Phil Collinson, sack Julie Gardner.
Well, that was an interesting scenario. Thanks for that, Optical. Now for the next one.
Stop, don't move.
Now, let me bring you to our next story. Now, in this timeline, everything plays out the exact same until the story Death to the Daleks, made in 1974. In this version of events, Bilal, at the end of the story, is asked by the Doctor, "Bilal, you gorgeous creature, you legend, you beauty I'm not worthy to see, shall you grant me the honour of boarding my TARDIS and let me see the stars through your eyes?" Bilal would nod, and off they would go. Very quickly, Bilal would become a fan favourite, becoming even more popular than Doctor himself, leading to Arnold Yarrow being put on multiple talk shows, getting his own magazine line, and millions of Bilal toys being put in stores. This would also influence the writing, as it would be Bilal who defeats Eckersley in the very next story, while the Doctor just stands there aimlessly. It would be Bilal who saves the Doctor from his radiation poisoning by absorbing it into himself and farting it out at what would have been the end of Jon Pertwee's run. But due to Bilal being such a great and beloved character, Pertwee decided he'd stay on a little longer. It would be Bilal who'd stop the Doctor from wiping out the Daleks, Bilal who would defeat Sutekh, the god of death, by merely glancing at him and scaring the poor deity away. It would be Bilal who would save the Doctor from dying again by drop-kicking the Watcher and giving him CPR after falling off the radio tower. And sadly, it would be Bilal who would make the unfortunate choice of saving Adric by using pure skill alone. He'd find a way to switch their places via transmat and would seemingly die defeating the Cybermen. This would cause outrage amongst fans. People would throw things at Peter Davison in the street, viewership would go down to maybe like 3 people a night, and it wasn't racking any money back in. So in 1985, Michael Grade would cancel the show and leave a note to JNT saying, "You killed our baby." The show would remain dead for many years. People would mourn Bilal, holding festivals in his honour each year, some restaurants in the late 1980s even naming themselves after the character. To be until in 2004, where Russell T Davies would announce that he was rebooting Doctor Who. Now, by this point, people were still annoyed at Bilal's death, but he'd moved on. So they were excited to see what Russell had cooked up. And on March 26, 2005, the episode Rose would air. And we see Rose living her normal life, going to work, being stalked by the Autons. But as she is backed into the corner, her hand is grabbed by another's. She wouldn't look up to see Christopher Eccleston, oh no, she'd look up to see the beautiful, the magnificent Lord himself. And we find out that Bilal had really survived the explosion and was merely finding their way home via jumping off of asteroids one at a time. And that during the Time War, after the Doctor just died, Bilal took the TARDIS, killed all the Daleks with a single fart, killed all the Time Lords with a clap of his hands, and shot off into the stars. And from there we'd get the original series 1 to 4, but with Bilal as the lead, with much less death and much quicker success. There would be no Daleks as, well, obviously he wiped them all out, duh. He found a way to alter time so that both of Rose's parents are still alive. He'd stop the Slovene from bombing 10 Downing Street. He caused Jack's immortality by kissing it right into him. He prevented the Cybermen from ever ruining Pete's world by hopping over for a cup of tea, having a good quickie with John Lumick, and hopping all the way back again. He'd scared a Jadoon away from the moon, prevent the TARDIS from ever going to the year 100 trillion by whispering to it calmly. And by the end of Series 4, he'd have Rose, Martha, Donna, and Jack all by his side. Oh yeah, the gang is back with a bang. A very big bang. Arnold Yarrow would have won 4 Oscars for all 4 series, as his performance was just so good that people just had to give him the award. And he'd be one of the biggest ever figures of the UK, even bigger than the royal family. Beat that, Charlie boy. And things would continue like this until 2025, where due to Arnold's death on December 9th, 2024, they wouldn't be able to make any more seasons. And due to no one understanding the character like he did, they decided just to cancel the show post Series 15. Now you're probably wondering what's the point of this story? Well, the point is that Bilal is the best Doctor Who character of all time, and if you disagree, then you're just plain wrong. Well, there we go. Thank you, Vinny, for bringing justice to our beloved Bilal, and roll the next one. Frobisher, one of the most beloved characters in a Doctor Who mythos. Talking, shape-shifting, detective-solving life form that takes the shape of Penguin and speaks like a classic noir detective. That right there is absolute cinema. Yet despite existing for over 42 years, the character has yet to appear in the main TV series. But what if they had? What if Frobisher was in the TV show?
Hey, do you mind? It's embarrassing. I'm all naked here.
In this alternate timeline, Frobisher's first appearance in the show would be in the Twin Dilemma, and he would go on to accompany the 6th Doctor and Peri. When we first meet Frobisher, he's disguised as Kevin McNally's Hugo Lang, with that character just being a disguise and not an actual character in this scenario. It's in part 3 of the adventure where Frobisher accidentally reveals himself as a shapeshifter to Doctor and Perry when he transforms into a penguin. When it came to translating Frobisher into live action, several ideas were thrown around. Initially, the production team planned to use an actual penguin actor named Percy to play the role. Unfortunately, Percy choked on a breadstick and died, so that idea was scrapped. Eric Saywood then suggested using CGI to create the effects, with the BBC reaching out to Industrial Light and Magic in hopes of hiring them to create a CGI penguin. But once again, the BBC ran into more trouble, as they were just 20p short of meeting ILM's requested budget. The final and eventual idea came from Colin Baker himself, who suggested hiring a small actor to wear a fluffy penguin costume. And after weeks upon weeks of screen testing, the actor who was chosen for the role was Danny DeVito. Season 22 would see DeVito's Frobisher as a full-time companion, joining the Doctor and Perry on their travels to Varos, Spain, even wherever the fuck Timelash is set. However, unbeknownst to the Doctor and Perry, Frobisher isn't just another goody little two-shoes like them, he's actually an assassin. An assassin hired by a mysterious client named M. Grade to kill the Doctor. Across the season, Frobisher would make several attempts on the Doctor's life using all sorts of forms of death, from being shot down by a Tommy gun, to a boiling acid attack, to even hijacking the TARDIS and sending it to Hiroshima in 1945. All of this would culminate in the ending of the season finale, Revelation of the Daleks, with the story ending on the shocking cliffhanger of Frobisher pulling out an iced out FAMAS, putting on some cool shades, and telling the Doctor, "This is the end of the world for you, Doc." For fans of Doctor Who, those 18 months between seasons felt like 20 eternities. A resolution to this world-shattering cliffhanger was needed, and needed as soon as possible. During the build-up for Season 23, fans were pleased to learn that the character would indeed be sticking around for its entirety, although it would prove to be his last season. Eventually, the day finally arrived. The day Doctor Who returned to our screens, and fans were left beyond disappointed. Rather than an epic and dramatic conclusion to that cliffhanger, fans were instead greeted by the cliffhanger being ignored altogether, with part 1 of the mysterious planet beginning with the 6th Doctor and Frobisher being summoned to the Gallifreyan station, and acting like chummy pals with no mention as to what happened in between seasons. To say fans were upset by this revelation would be an understatement. They were really upset. So upset, in fact, that they started riots, which eventually culminated in the BBC fire of 1986. Following on from Season 23's finale, which saw Frobisher leaving the Doctor to become Lord President of Gallifrey, and after recovering from the fire, the BBC declared that the character of Frobisher would never return to Doctor Who, a decision that then led to the BBC fire of 87. Over the next few years, the love for Frobisher and his time on the show continued to grow and grow, even becoming popular with audience members who had given up on the show a long time ago. As 1991 came to a head, with it becoming clear that Doctor Who wasn't going to be coming back anytime soon, Frobisher Mania was underway. Frobisher was everywhere, from t-shirts to McDonald's merchandise to even blue tack. Yes, that's right, Frobisher-themed blue tack. He even got his own noir spin-off in America, which started in 1994. Although treated as its own individual thing separate from Doctor Who, there would be a crossover episode in 1996 with Paul McGann to promote the TV movie that same year. The character would also have a habit of being licensed out by the BBC, allowing other studios to include the character in their work. From playing a love interest to Jadzia Dax on Deep Space Nine, to becoming Frasier's new neighbour in Frasier, and even having a small cameo in Lois and Clark, Frobisher was everywhere. The peak of Frobisher mania came in 1992, when Tim Burton announced that Danny DeVito's Frobisher will play the role of Batman's main nemesis in the upcoming Batman Returns. Although fan reception to this inclusion was somewhat divisive, what with the character being renamed to the Penguin and being changed into like a totally different character and somehow being retconned into old Batman stories that predated Frobisher's creation, the film was a success. However, my personal favourite bit of Frobisher Mania was that swanky Parliament cigarette advert that was originally offered to Charlie Sheen.
That's got show on here right now. That's that shit I need.
Frobisher Mania would slowly start to dwindle by 1998, which resulted in the Frobisher series ending the next year. However, like all good ideas, you can't keep my G down forever, as in 2004 it was announced that a Frobisher movie was in the works, with director of Good Burger and Norbit, Brian Robbins, set to direct, and Frobisher recast with a pre-MCU Robert Downey Jr. Despite having a strong opening weekend, the film was ultimately a box office disaster. The film was panned hard. To say it was bad was an understatement. It was very bad, which led to the Paramount fire of 2006. Following on from the third fire involving Frobisher, it was announced by the leaders of the world that Frobisher, the name, character, and anything related to them, would be banned worldwide. 3 times now, the character had led to the deaths of hundreds of people. And so, to ensure no more people would die from Frobisher fires, any trace of Frobisher would be destroyed. And that's exactly what happened. All film prints were destroyed, all DVDs wiped out by a Frobisher EMP, all children's stuffed toys seized and blown up, and even Danny DeVito himself was burnt in a woodpile, Guy Fawkes style, to make sure that there would be absolutely zero remaining trace of this shape-shifting, talking penguin. Unfortunately, God wasn't happy. He was a big fan of the 2006 Frobisher film, and now his DVD had been wiped, which led to the Great Earth Fire of 2007, wiping out nearly 3/4 of the population.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
Well, thank you, Optical, for that very dark scenario, and thank you all for watching this utterly crazy video. If you've made it this far, please seek some counselling immediately. But seriously, thanks for watching. I promise normal service will be resumed for the next What If, and I'll see you all in another video. So, until next time,
So long, farewell, our readers saying goodbye.
it's in part 3 of the adventure, where Frobisher accidentally reveals himself as a shapeshifter to the Doctor and Penguin. To the Doctor and Perry when he transforms into a penguin.